Welcome back to the SLOBCAST. This is the weekly show where I talk about my life as a professional streamer. This week we're going to be taking a look at some of the questions that you guys left me in the comment section on my YouTube channel. If you want to participate in future Q&As, just go to youtube.com/deadlyslob, go to the SLOBCAST playlist, and leave your question in the most recent video, and I'll do my best to pick a good diversity of questions. And for my listeners on YouTube, you can go find the SLOBCAST on iTunes, Google Play, and on Stitcher. And you can also catch me live every single day starting at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and Sundays at noon at twitch.tv/deadlyslob. Alright, let's get started with some of these questions. First question of the night is going to be coming in from Kangaroo Jack. What can you do if you've never done anything on YouTube? What is the best editing software, and what mic and face cams and stuff like that would you recommend for starting off? Now, there really isn't that many free editing softwares out there that aren't going to kind of string you along. Most of the free software also provides a pro version, so you have limited features. Windows Movie Maker, even if you have a Windows 10 machine, you can download Windows Movie Maker 12 and have it work on your machine. And I believe, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm actually not a Mac user, but I know back in the day you used to get some pretty great free editing software just by buying a MacBook or having an actual Mac computer. But if you don't have access to that, you're going to have to go and find some free software online. Just be aware that most free software limit the tools that you have available to you because they want you to buy a pro version of it. Sometimes they even put watermarks, or they have like a audio feed that kind of goes over the video clip you're trying to edit, which could be really annoying. I have been using Sony Vegas for a very long time, pretty much almost since the beginning I got started on YouTube, or shortly after. Sony Vegas is great, but the catch is it's fairly expensive, but it's a one-time payment. Adobe Premiere is a really good editing software. If you actually get Adobe Premiere and learn how to use it, it's pretty much industry standard at this point. Even you can do more things with Premiere than you can with Vegas. Vegas just makes it very easy to do video game commentaries and recording and rendering. Very, very easy, but that comes at a cost a little bit of just having access to cool tools. On top of purchasing Sony Vegas, I also have Adobe Creative Cloud, so that gives me access to Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop, the entire Adobe library for just a monthly subscription. If you're into doing things like video editing or graphics design, or just pretty much if you use Adobe products, you might want to consider getting a monthly subscription. It's worth it for me because obviously I stream full time and I make videos and it helps my income. So it makes sense. But if you're looking to get started, it might be a little bit more challenging to finance that. But just know that most of the free software out there isn't really going to be giving you the tools that you need. I recommend getting Windows Movie Maker and then also downloading a program called Audacity. Audacity is going to allow you to record your commentaries and edit them and then import the audio feeds into Windows Movie Maker. Correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't used Windows Movie Maker in a long time, but the current version does not have a commentary button. The old school Windows Movie Maker beta did. It actually looked very similar to Sony Vegas setup, and it doesn't have that feature anymore. At least I couldn't find it. So Windows Movie Maker, and you want to get Audacity. Now, when it comes to microphones, I truly believe that the Blue Yeti is the best beginner microphone out there. Or the Snowball, either or, just epic quality for the price. It's a USB plug and play, very basic, very easy. My only recommendation if you get a Yeti is you need to get a microphone stand with a shock mount, because you don't want to have the microphone just sitting at a desk, because whenever you hit the keyboard, just like I did now, it's going to be picking it up a lot more than what you guys just heard. I have a shock mount, so it wasn't as bad, and normally I'm not going to be slamming my hands on the keyboard, especially when I'm streaming. Now, you're also going to want to get a pop filter. Blue does sell a pop filter that hooks into the microphone stand that sits on a desk for Blue Yeti. I own that way back in the day. It's not very good, I'm not going to lie. So you can get a cheap one on Amazon for like under $20, and it should work and be able to hook into any microphone setup that you get. If you want to go a little bit higher end, I'm currently using a Rode NT1 condenser microphone using a Scarlett Solo interface. That is, in my opinion, incredible value and great quality, but it is a little bit more on the higher end. So it's going to cost you for the interface, the microphone, everything, probably $500, maybe $600. I would get the Blue Yeti right now, and then if you want to take things a little bit more seriously in the future, then consider getting a Rode microphone. Next question is coming in from Norbert. Do you have a delay on your stream? Shouldn't that remove the whole aspect of stream sniping, or at least limit it? How much of a delay is too much, or it depends on the game? So before Twitch added their low latency broadcasting option, I usually streamed at about a 7 to 15 second delay. And that's not something that I set. That was just the delay between my computer connecting to the Twitch server and then the viewer watching the channel. My recommendation is to have a delay that is no more than like 30 seconds. That kind of takes a little bit of the fun out of the live stream, I think, if there's a significant delay. Even some of the biggest broadcasters in the world, like Shroud, Dr. Disrespect, playing PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, sure, they run into a lot of stream snipers, but you still see them not running a delay, and there's a reason behind that. It does take a little bit of the authenticity and the fun out of the broadcast, knowing that there's a few minutes delay, and what you're seeing isn't really actually live. In fact, if you're streaming on Twitch, I'd recommend going with the low latency option because it literally has like a 1 or 2 second delay maximum, and it's really cool to actually engage with your chat in real time. That's the point of live streaming, right? And sure, you're going to have the odd stream sniper here and there. And I think this is a good conversation to have about how you should handle stream sniping. You got to remember, like, the reason why people stream snipe is they're seeking attention. It doesn't matter why they're seeking the attention. They're just seeking it. They're trying to get your reaction or a response from you. Sometimes even looking for that negative response, like they want to see you freak out. The moment that you give into that and you get mad and angry, you're going to get stream sniped more. It's going to happen all the time. And honestly, when I used to play Dayz, for those that don't know what Dayz is, it's a hardcore survival game. So you start on the coast, you gather supplies in an online multiplayer environment, and your character can pretty much live for as long as you can keep him alive. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks, in even rare cases, months. So obviously having somebody know your location, come over, and then kill you can be very frustrating. And it was for me at times. And when I was first starting to stream, sometimes I would give into that frustration. And the moment that you do give into that frustration, not only is it off-putting to yourself whenever you watch it back, but it's off-putting to your viewers as well. Like, they don't want to see you complaining about stream snipers. And that's a lesson that I learned the hard way. I even had many times people just comment and be like, hey man, like, it's number one, it's really hard to get proof that it's actually happening. Sometimes you have a situation where somebody is stupid enough to have the same name in the chat on Twitch as in game, and you can make the connection. But in most cases, it's very difficult to tell. So if you're not too sure, or at least if you lack the proper proof to complain about it, if you're going to be going in that direction, it can be a real downer to the vibe of the broadcast. It's a real negative vibe, and that's something that you want to avoid. Remember, if you listen to SLOBCAST number 2 and number 3, I talk about the importance of maintaining the positive vibe and atmosphere in the stream, and complaining about stream sniping is definitely not going to help you with that. So here's how I handle it. I just give everybody the benefit of the doubt all the time. Even when my chat is like rioting because it's so obvious, I always think to myself, okay, is there a possibility that I could have given away my position in my game? Or is there a chance that this didn't happen? And most of the time, the answer is, yeah, there's something I could have overlooked. I didn't check a corner. Somebody could have overwatched me on a hill. I got spotted in this position. I could have got just outplayed. So most of the time, I usually go through that thought process openly on the stream. We actually have a conversation about it, because in most cases it's going to result in your death on the game, and then you can try to maybe learn a lesson from that, or maybe try to change your playstyle a little bit so it doesn't happen next time. But I am certainly not a saint. If you go back and watch a lot of my older Dayz broadcasts or Dayz videos, there are certainly times where I am complaining about stream snipers, or somebody in my squad is actively complaining about stream sniping. It is something that right now, looking back, I'm not proud of that. But I've learned to change the way I look at stream sniping, and I think it's definitely been for the better. Again, like I said, like I'm sure I'm going to get the odd person that is going to be in my chat or in the comment section here and being like, Deadly, I remember you complain about stream sniping all the time in Dayz, and that is 100% true. And I learned from Dayz, honestly. Like, Dayz was definitely my proving grounds of a streamer. There's a lot of mistakes I made in Dayz and whenever I was broadcasting in that category. So many mistakes that I learned and then carried over into Escape from Tarkov, which is my primary game. And those lessons have made me such a better broadcaster, like night and day from whenever I got started. Here's the last thing I'll say about stream sniping before moving on to the next question. Don't even mention the words. That is something that I learned from a great broadcaster in Dayz named The Running Man. The less you can mention stream sniping, even creating like a code word like pink flamingos like Mr. B did back in the day, like just don't even mention the words, because just talking about stream sniping during your broadcast gives a negative vibe. All right, next question is coming in from Jose. When do you think it's time to move on from streaming and just know it's not your thing to do? Also, do you think it's better to stream in your native language, Spanish or English? I'm going to start off by talking about the native language first, and then we'll finish up this question by talking about when you should give up. Now, when it comes to broadcasting your native language, I think it's better if you do. Just know that you're not going to be reaching as many potential viewers as if you streamed in English. I know a lot of people choose to stream in English because they recognize that it's just a larger demographic that they're going to be reaching than just people that are speaking, for example, Spanish. But that being said, I think you're also going to be in a situation where it's going to be less saturated if you are speaking Spanish and people are looking for a Spanish streamer. There's going to be less streamers that speak your language, and more people are going to be gravitating to you. But I'm sure you probably already know that. So this is how I would actually do it. I would spend 2 weeks streaming in English, and then I would spend 2 weeks streaming in Spanish. At the end of the month, I would take a look at those 2 weeks and see which one was more successful, which broadcast would bring you the most reach, the most followers, the most chat engagement, and then from there, make your decision. So let's talk a little bit about the first part of this question. When should you consider stopping broadcasting because you give it an honest try? So any motivational speaker out there is going to tell you to never give up. And I think a lot of bigger broadcasters, especially with this whole situation with Uber, a live streamer who created a very emotional video about his journey becoming a full-time broadcaster, and then that video going viral and many larger broadcasters reaching out to him, saying that they can do shout outs, collaborations, these like things like that to kind of keep his streaming career going. That guy, I mean, I don't know him, I've never spoken to him, but he made a decision that enough was enough. He felt like his life was being led in a bad direction, and he was making a move to go in a different direction for his own self-development and happiness. Now, I haven't checked up on what Uber is doing now, if he's decided to continue streaming or not, but I do know that if I was in a situation like he was in, that would have been the moment where I would be moving in a different direction with my life. You know, like usually people become full-time streamers to increase their quality of life, to move away from a job that they absolutely hate, to do something that they really love to do. And I think that's why when broadcasters come in and they only stream for the money, it's so transparent and those people never make it. Like if you don't actually like the idea of streaming or making YouTube videos, you probably shouldn't be doing it for a living, because you have to sacrifice a lot to actually do this successfully. But if you love what you do, the sacrifices are worth it. For me, it took 1 year streaming part-time, like just before I started work in the morning. and then 2 years full-time before I started making enough money where it felt like it was worth it. In full-time for me is 5 to 6 hours of streaming time, plus making a YouTube video nearly every single day, not including all the extra stuff that comes along with it, like all the just, replying to comments, replying to email, getting your overlays, managing your emotes, like just all the petty business kind of stuff that comes along with broadcasting. That's not included in that time. So I would say that if you put in 3 to 4 years of streaming part-time or possibly full-time, and it's just not working for you, you are making little to no money for the amount of time that you're putting in, things are getting pretty serious, you feel like your life isn't moving in any meaningful direction, and at that point, then I would consider looking for something else to focus your time on. But again, don't let anybody be the person to tell you to make that decision for you, because that's a really big choice, and that choice relies on you. I would say you're going to have to be calculated by staying on your analytics every 3 months or so, making sure that you're moving in the right direction. Also keeping a very close eye on your bank account if you're streaming full time to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a dangerous situation. And if you're not streaming enough, like let's say you're streaming for fun or part-time and you think that you're getting to a position where the amount of time that you're putting in is not equal to the enjoyment that you're getting out of it, maybe it's time to stop broadcasting and just find a new hobby to take up your time. I know that can be pretty difficult, but you either need to put yourself in a situation where you make some drastic changes with your broadcast, like putting in more time or possibly taking it more seriously, or just moving on and doing something else. Next question is coming in from my man Shrimp. What made you to decide to start streaming and making videos, and how long have you been playing games? Well, if you haven't already listened to SLOBCAST number 1, it's an entire podcast that's devoted to talking about how I got started streaming and making videos. But let's talk a little bit more about the latter part of your question, like how long have I been playing video games for? I did not play a whole lot of video games until I was around 8 or 9 years old. So before then, pretty much not at all. My father owned a Atari, like an old school Atari 2600, and I played a few games on that, but back then the Atari wasn't kept in perfect condition, so to get the thing actually working correctly, it took a little bit of time, like a lot of work with the cartridges just to get them to work. He had the infamous E.T. game, like largely considered one of the worst games of all time, Space Invaders. Space Invaders is the one that I remember the most in E.T. The rest, I don't. So, but again, even still, we did not play the Atari that much. Like, I remember we had access to it, but I played it a few times. I think it's just because I wasn't smart enough to figure out how to actually get it to work. So I just never went after it when I was a kid. And you're probably wondering, isn't it just like plugged in? It wasn't. So it wasn't actually set up next to our regular entertainment system. It was kind of like set off in like a box on its own. So I needed to like get the box, take it out, plug it into the TV, like make sure all of it worked. And I would have been like, when I was playing the Atari, I was probably like 5, possibly 6. So didn't really play with it too much. And then the second time I was exposed to video games would have been the original Nintendo that my uncle owned. And he had Duck Hunt, and he also had Super Mario 3. And I used to play that in the basement all the time. Like I used to love going over there, playing some Super Mario. It was awesome. And I loved it so much that like, and my brothers did too, we were constantly asking for one. And we didn't buy a brand new one, but my cousins actually had a old Nintendo. And by this time, just to remember, like this would have been the late 90s. So the N64 was already out. It was like the thing to have, and also like PC games for people that were actually playing video games back then. For us, we were very much just getting into it, so we didn't know too much. Like at that point, I didn't even know an N64 existed. So I just wanted a Nintendo. So they had an old Nintendo that was just not being used. So they gave it to us and a bunch of games, like pretty much all the games. Like I'm actually still surprised that they gave it to us. We even had the game Narc, and that game was awesome because it was like you were on motorcycles and you were kind of like shooting it up. I remember like our parents were like super keen on us playing that game back then. The cartridge was like black. I'm pretty sure the box it came in was black.
Dude, that game was awesome. I remember my brother and I used to love, like, used to have to find it. Like, we used to have to sneak it and just, like, grab Narc, throw it in the old Nintendo, and then play it. Whenever, like, I remember, but the Nintendo barely worked as well. Like, I don't know what was up with these old machines, man, but they just never like to work. So we would have to scramble to try to get, like, Duck Hunt with the original, like, gun or, like, Super Mario to actually work before school. And then if we got the chance, we used to play it a little bit. The first console that we owned, though, was definitely the N64, and it took us years to save up money for this thing. The first time I was exposed to that, I was going over to a friend's house. They were playing, I think it was like Pokemon Snap and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And that was the moment that I knew I wanted to play video games. That right then. Because I remember sitting down on that couch and watching my friend play Ocarina of Time, and my mind was blown away. Because, like, I remember we played the Atari, and then we played the original Nintendo. So going from that was my limited understanding of games in the 90s. And then seeing Ocarina of Time in 3D graphics in this open world, it was such a game changer that I immediately went home and was like, I want this. So my brothers and I, we saved up some money. Took us about a year, if I recall correctly, to save up money enough. Like, we had a weekly allowance. And then we bought us N64. And then that was it. Pretty much at that moment on, I was a gamer. I just loved playing games. I used to rent N64 games, like, on Friday nights. Used to go down to a Canadian brand. Used to be called Jumbo Video. I don't know if any Canucks are listening. Poor Jumbo. They closed down just like Blockbuster. Used to go over, rent like Destruction Derby 64. That was like one of my favorite rentable games. Wake up at like 5 a.m. Saturday morning and we just play Destruction Derby. And the reason why I got up so early is because my brothers were still asleep. So it would actually give me a few hours to myself where I could play the game before they would fight over it. So that was what I would do. That was kind of like my ritual. I remember it would have been around like 98. My dad called us down. So this was a little bit, we're kind of backtracking. So this was before we got the N64. But this is like during the period of time where I really wanted it. Around 98 or 99, I think. He comes down. And he's got this big gray box sitting in the basement. And he's like, you guys are not going to believe this. I got something. You guys are going to love it. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's an N64. It's got to be this console that we've been talking about nonstop. And he opens up the box, and it's a computer. It's a home computer. It's like a Windows 98 machine. And it was like a Dell computer. But you got to remember, at this point, the only experience I've had with computers was like typing in random letters on my dad's old DOS computer. That was it. And I didn't know how to do anything because I was too young. So I didn't even know that you could play games on the computer at that point. Because like I would have been 8 years old. So had no idea the power of this machine. But I would learn very quickly that you could do some pretty cool stuff on the machine. But it took me a few years, around, I think it was like 2000. So a few years later that I started playing computer games like Age of Empires and like RuneScape and stuff. But at that point, I was still hungry for that N64. We got the N64, and then like pretty much from there on, birthday gifts were like video games. Christmas gifts, I got a Game Boy Color, like Pokemon. And then that was it. Like any sort of like big gift was like a video game for my Game Boy or my N64. But at this point, I still haven't played any like shooters because my parents were pretty conservative with the video games back then. Like if there was any sort of violence, it was usually a no-go. So one night, one of my first sleepovers with a buddy from school, he introduced me to the Xbox and Halo Combat Evolved. And that was another moment that just blew my mind. We sat down, did the entire cooperative campaign on Halo. And it was literally like the sun was rising in the morning. And we were in the Pillar of Autumn in the last mission in the Warthog. Just like driving to victory. And then that was it. And there was a multiplayer. And I was like totally on board. And then I started like getting friends in school who also had Xbox with Halo. I didn't have it at the time, but I would usually go over. We would do co-op, like we would fight against each other, all vehicles, Sidewinder. And then that was the next thing that I wanted. And I kept on asking for an Xbox non-stop until about 2004. So even though I played Halo Combat Evolved enough, like played and beat the campaign and the story, I didn't own it myself. I got my Xbox at the release of Halo 2. So that was the thing. It was a Christmas, got Halo 2 with the Xbox, and then played the entire campaign. And that was our introduction to Xbox Live. So that was like, Halo 2 was a big moment. And around this time, I was also playing games like Diablo 2. Did not play World of Warcraft in the early days. I only started playing WoW in 2005. So I was a little bit late to that, 2005, 2006. And throughout all this time, I'm playing also like RuneScape and other games too. So I'm not going to go over and list like every single game that I've played up until this point, but also like the timeline lines up perfectly to 2006, October 2006, when I created the username Deadly Slob, and that was it. The rest is history. Next question is coming in from Lars. What do you think about the current state of Dayz now? So for some of my listeners that might be unaware, again, Dayz is a post-apocalyptic zombie survival simulator in a multiplayer environment with like 30 to 60 other players currently. And the ultimate goal is to survive. Now, unfortunately, the development of Dayz is one of the most controversial in the history of video games and early access games. And that's because the length of time it's taken to develop the game to the point where it is right now, 5 years in, still in early access alpha. In fact, we're still testing out the beta patch on an experimental branch, and that experimental branch is expected to take a very long time. So there hasn't been a stable update to the game in over a year now. So of course, fans are upset and not really happy with the direction in which the game has gone. Now, in that year, they have spent lots of time redeveloping the entire game. How you interact in the environment, the atmosphere, the zombies, the player controller, it's all different, but at a cost, because their community has sort of erupted and left. Now, currently in the testing build for the beta, you can do some things, but it is a shell of a game that it currently is on the stable branch, or what it's supposed to be. There's very little content there. There's very little things that you can actually do. So until they add more weapons, more equipment, the vehicles, the base building, all the content that is currently in their stable branch game that isn't in the beta, and until they get the current experimental beta version of the game up to the point where you can do some of the stuff that you can even play in their current build, I'm going to be staying away from it for now, because there really isn't anything to do. It's a cool update, and it's a glimpse of what might be happening in the future, but there's nothing in the current development team's track record that gives me any confidence anymore that they're actually going to be meeting their goals. So until they can show us that they're actually able to introduce some of these cool new features, we have to pretty much sit at the sidelines and play other games. And there's lots of other games that we can check out. So Dayz, unfortunately, in my books, is not looking too hot for the future. All right, the next question is coming in from Crippy. How do you get better at talking while streaming and recording solo? Practice. Hours and hours and hours of practice. I know you're going to be a little self-conscious about it now. Even I am today. Like, I do make mistakes all the time. If you're listening to this podcast, you can hear little cuts here and there where I've made mistakes. So it does take a lot of time to get to the point where you feel comfortable talking to a microphone. I remember when I first started streaming, first started making YouTube videos, it felt weird. Like, it was really strange talking to a computer like it was an actual person. But you got to remember that you are talking to people. It's like I'm talking to thousands of people right now, right, that are listening to this podcast. So you aren't really just talking to yourself. So just try to picture that you're having a conversation with another human being, that people are listening to you, especially when you're recording, especially when you're live streaming. And if you are starting to stream and you have little viewers, like no viewers or maybe one or two viewers, always make sure that you're having a conversation. Like, never keep an eye on your view count, and always act like somebody is listening all the time, because chances are somebody is, And if they're listening and they like what you have to say, then you might earn yourself a follower, because people are always looking to invest themselves in new communities on Twitch. In fact, that's a really big part of Twitch, is new communities. There's a lot of people out there that do not like large communities. There's a lot of my OG fan base that doesn't really like my streams anymore because it's gotten too big to the point where they miss that small community feel. So that's going to be your target. Always act like you're talking to somebody all the time, and practice makes perfect. The next question is coming in from Zani. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How do you keep your beard? Pretty simple. Exceptional laziness. All right, that's key. So don't shave. And good genetics. I wasn't able to really grow much of a beard until I was around 23, and I'm only 25 now, turning 26 this year. So it's only been a few years that I've been able to actually grow a good full beard. And even still, my beard has a long way to go, especially on the cheeks. So I do use beard oil, but that is only a new thing. I only started using it like 2 or 3 months ago. It's going to make your beard a lot more soft, and you're going to be able to comb it easier. But I wish I could go back in time and tell my 17-year-old self that you cannot grow facial hair yet, because I tried and I grew a disgusting chin strappy neck beard basically, and I thought I was the king shit of facial hair, and I certainly was not. I go back and look at photos and it was like little beard stubble in just all the wrong places. So I think if you can't grow a beard, then you shouldn't, because sure, like beard culture is definitely huge in the gaming community, but you're kind of like on a fine line, because you definitely don't want a neck beard, because nobody likes a neck beard, right? So if you can only grow hair on your neck, shave that shit, wait a couple years, like the odds are in a few more years you'll be able to grow a beard. I'm talking to people that are even in their mid-20s. I've talked to a few people who have some pretty amazing beards, and they said that they only started growing good full beards when they were like 30, 35. So it can take some time. Next question is coming in from Korashan. Can you get more detail on the technical stuff? If you're streaming, how do you make a montage to upload to your YouTube? Do you record your stream in parallel? Do you download the whole stream and edit it locally? Do you use Twitch editor and download only the highlights? What I've got so far was creating single highlights in Twitch and then uploading each individual highlight to YouTube, but not as one montage. All right, so this is how I have my setup. I got 2 computers. I have a gaming computer, which is just primarily playing games. And then I have a streaming computer. The gaming computer feeds the video and audio through an HDMI cord into my streaming computer using the Elgato HD60 Pro capture card, which is an internal capture card in my streaming computer. From there, I've installed Open Broadcast Software Studio, OBS Studio, and that's what I use to stream. Inside my streaming computer, I have a GeForce 770 graphics card that I use to record my broadcasts, and you can set that up in OBS using the NVENC codec or the NVENC codec. It's basically the same thing as doing shadow play, but you can have more control over the bitrate and you have way more options. So graphics card in the streaming computer records, and my CPU, my Ryzen 1700X, does the broadcasting. My gaming computer is an i7 6700K processor at 4.4 gigahertz. A little bit older. I am actually going to be upgrading soon. And the graphics card that I use on my gaming computer is a GeForce 970. Sometimes, especially for these types of videos, I do record using my gaming computer, using OBS through the same method, using my graphics card. It's probably the most efficient way of recording. Might not give you the best quality though, but it's still the most efficient. Now on my streaming computer, I have external hard drives that are USB 3, Western Digital Passports. I have these because I edit on my gaming computer. So that's where the gaming computer is my primary computer, so I do most of my work on that. So I record with OBS directly to the external drive. It's fast enough to pick it up, no problem. I just unplug it, plug it into my gaming computer, edit. So I usually record the entire stream. So you're probably wondering, how can you actually quickly and efficiently edit down a 5-hour stream? Well, I can tell whenever I'm in a gunfight in Escape from Tarkov based on the audio feed. So if I look at the entire 5-hour clip, it's pulled completely back on the video editor. I know when something is happening and something isn't. So I can quickly cut out all the bits that I don't need, like all the downtime, look through all the gunfights to see if there's anything matching up with the story or the video idea, and then I can cut those each individual highlights and make a video out of it simply by looking at the audio channel. So yeah, like usually whenever something crazy is happening, the audio is just up and down, all like getting really loud, and then usually it abruptly stops. So whenever that happens, either something really, really good has happened or something really bad. And then I remember from doing the live stream the general idea of what's happening in that raid, and then I did make the decision to cut it and piece it into the video. And then from there, I usually try to edit down each individual encounter, especially if there's a lot of downtime, because I know that people don't have time to watch like 30 or 40 videos on YouTube like every single day. So most of my raids in Escape from Tarkov are like 20, 30 minutes. And a lot of that is that like me walking around doing stuff that nobody wants to see. So I have to cut all that stuff out too. So it just takes practice, keep at it, and eventually you'll find a strategy that works for you. I'm going to also include this. There's many times where I actually forget to record or something happens to the file. You can download the entire highlight or the entire video feed directly from Twitch. Once you've downloaded it, throw it into your video editor. Just know it's going to be at a lesser quality, usually like a 720p quality and a little bit more grainy because the bitrate is limited. Because I record at 50,000 bitrate, and that downloaded highlight is at 8,000 bitrate. So obviously the quality is not going to be as good. And you can always tell on my YouTube videos when I've done a Twitch highlight or a Twitch download or something that's been actually recorded. It's night and day. But usually my audience is really patient with that because they know, like, I'm not a full-time streamer. I consider myself a full-time YouTuber. So I do look to upload the highest quality that I can. But for me, it's important to just get something up on YouTube. And sometimes I have to make certain sacrifices. Like if there's something really cool that happened on the stream that I just don't have a recording for, I'm totally going to suck it up and just download the Twitch highlight and get it up there because I know the YouTube community is going to find it cool. All right, so we got 3 more questions we're going to be getting to tonight. So we got 2 questions from a guy named Fontanalis. Question number 1, what is, in your opinion, the worst part of being a streamer on Twitch? And the second question is, what is, in your opinion, the worst feature and problem that could ruin Tarkov, Escape from Tarkov? So let's talk about number 1. The worst part about being a streamer on Twitch is the competitive nature and time requirement. I think that's definitely the worst part about Twitch. Being successful on Twitch means you need to be here as much as possible and to be streaming consistently as much as possible. So that means making certain sacrifices, like working 7 days a week, being on for sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, and then still having to work together, like to piece together a YouTube video or do something else that you have to work on for the broadcast that really extends your time. Having to make certain sacrifices because you are always working on the weekends. So if your spouse, your fiance, your wife or husband, they have a job, they want to take the day off, they want to hang out with you, you can choose to sacrifice that, and not work. But for me, for every single day I take off, it takes me about 4 days to recover. So if I start taking off a lot of time, then I start moving backwards and not forwards. And that's just not something that I like to do on Twitch because that's a slippery slope. The moment you start feeling like you can start taking a lot of time off is the moment where the viewers in your community will recognize that and then slowly start to leave and watch somebody else who might be more dedicated than you. So definitely the time commitment. I think it's the biggest misconception. I think everybody thinks streaming is easy, and I'm not going to argue with them because I definitely don't think it's the most difficult job in the world, but it is certainly one of the most time consuming. Like, I put in 60, 70 hours a week into this job, and that's, I think, something that's completely unexpected because you're self-employed. So you need to have the discipline to force yourself to be on here so many hours a week. In fact, I just did it out. I work on average 9 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's 63 hours a week. And that is just on average. Like, there are days where I work longer than that too. Like, so, it's like a normal job, just with no benefits and very little time off. So you really need to love streaming if you want to do it for a living. And I do. So that's the thing about the sacrifices we were talking about earlier. There are certain things that you sacrifice in order to do a cool job like this. And the time commitment is certainly one of them. And yeah, it's my decision to work 7 days a week. But on Twitch, it's so competitive that if you want to be successful, you almost have to. There's lots of streamers, though, that only broadcast 5 days a week. But I'm sure if they streamed 7, they would be more successful than they are now. So you can definitely take time off. Totally. It's completely up to you. And every community is different. I think for me, I've built that expectation over years of broadcasting and streaming every single day that when I'm not there, it has a big impact on my community. So it's tough. Oh yeah, if you're somebody that really loves long vacations, you might have some stressful weeks whenever you return back. So the second part of his question is about the game Escape from Tarkov. So if you played that game, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, then you might want to skip to the next question. What is, in your opinion, the worst feature and problem that could ruin Tarkov? In my opinion, it's the anti-cheat. They just upgraded the anti-cheat software a few weeks ago, and it looks like it's had a good impact. It hasn't resolved the problem, but it's certainly reduced the amount of cheaters in the game. But there's also a significant amount of people that are using glitches and exploits in the game, like wall glitches to make themselves invincible, falling through the floor to give them instant 51 strength and endurance. You name it, they're exploiting it. So in my opinion, not having a good anti-cheat or not putting down the hammer on people that are actually choosing to exploit and cheat in the game using other means could ruin Tarkov. And we're already seeing implications of that already because people have moved away from the game after they get constantly killed by people who are cheating. All right, so the last question for today's podcast comes from DWK. Since you stream 7 days a week, how do you keep from burning out, not just on the game, but from constantly working every day without a weekend? Also, is income consistent or inconsistent? So I actually don't really know how I keep myself out from not burning out on broadcasting every single day. I guess I just knew when I wanted to become a streamer that I needed to work exceptionally hard to get to the point where I am now. And I've sort of just ingrained that in my mind to the point where I'm actually a bit of a workaholic. It's actually a bit of a problem. So I don't think anybody should dig themselves so deep to the point where they need to work 60 to 70 hours a week. I say that because I know that it works. I don't know if it's a good idea to suggest it, though, because you do have to sacrifice a significant part of your life to make this happen, man. And again, like my fiance tells me all the time that I'm a workaholic. My parents know, my friends know. I struggle going through a day without doing anything. I can't. I just can't. Like, I took the day off today, but I'm recording this podcast right now. You know what I mean? Like, I wrote some questions. I went through the comments. I made a bit of a script. I'm starting the recording. I got a YouTube video going up tonight. I'm doing some Photoshop. Like, I just can't go through the day without doing something. I don't think that's necessarily bad, though, if you really enjoy what you're doing. So I think because I love broadcasting so much, that's the reason why I don't get burnt out. And I'm to the point where I am able to make a living doing it, and I'm a pretty good living at that. So that is definitely an incentive. So I'm doing something that I really like, and I'm making some pretty good money. So boom, boom, some good incentives. It helps me keeping out from burning out. But everyone is different though, because like I've talked to other streamers that just don't know how I do this, how I'm here so much, how I do so much. So don't kill yourself. Know your limitations and recognize if you're doing things that are unhealthy. And I am the worst person to ever suggest that, because I am definitely doing things that are unhealthy for sure. So also, is income consistent or inconsistent? 100% inconsistent. That is another sort of sacrifice that you have to make. The money that you make on a monthly basis can change from hundreds to thousands of dollars in either direction on a monthly basis for little to no reason. So in my opinion, you need to make sure that the subscriptions is the most consistent thing about Twitch, because at least you have a subscriber for 30 days. So you can kind of expect a certain amount of income at the end of the month. That's why you should never full-time stream only relying on donations. You need to diversify your portfolio a little bit, either through YouTube ad revenue or through Twitch's subscription feature. You need to do things that are more than just receiving tips, because the moment that you are only surviving on donations and tips, you are putting your community in a very difficult position, because you are constantly harping on them for donations. You got donation meters everywhere, donation goals. You have so many donation alerts that it starts to cheapen your broadcast, and it starts showing that you're really only in it for the money and not really in it to build a community. And we all know how that works out on Twitch, right? Being humble is really important in the early stages of Twitch, unless it's your gimmick to be an asshole. And sometimes that actually works out. I'm not gonna lie. Like sometimes someone being like incredibly selfish or being not humble at all, having a big ego, does work out if it's in a gimmick situation. But, I find being humble is really important. So this concludes SLOBCAST number 4, the first Q&A in the podcast. If you guys want to get a chance to get your questions answered on the cast, then go to youtube.com/deadlyslob and leave a comment on the most recent SLOBCAST episode. Just a reminder, you can find me on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and hopefully at this point, Spotify. And you guys can catch me live every single day starting at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and Sundays at noon at twitch.tv/deadlyslob for survival shooter live streams on Twitch. And of course, daily videos on YouTube. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.